The dog everyone called Monster never took food from a stranger. Then he ate from her hand. Simone Carter closes the Bell and Time night kitchen alone. 25. Black, beautiful, slender. The tips in her apron won't cover her mother's surgery. They won't touch the debt her dead father left behind. The owner belittles her on the way out. Crossing the dark industrial lot, she notices the guard dog. Deep chest, black coat, scar over the muzzle, starving, chained beside one steel container. He snarls at everyone. He never lunges at her. So she starts feeding him. Weeks of it. Safe food, quiet Korean words she taught herself. Apron off, hair down. She kneels at the gate. Then the car arrives. A man steps out. South Korean, 29, built like a wall, black shirt cut tight. A serpent tattoo runs down the right side of his neck. Kang Ji-won, they call him the White Serpent. He sees the dog eating from her hand, the dog that takes food from no one. He freezes. Inside that steel container is something with her father's name on it, something that ties her ruin to his empire. But what she does with it next? Before starting the story, comment down below where you are watching from and what time it is there. If stories of karma, love, and hidden truths move you, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a member and help our channel. The last pan hit the drying rack at 11:41, and Simone counted the tips before she counted the hours she had left. $43 and some coins warm from a stranger's pocket. She flattened the bills on the steel counter, smoothed each crease with her thumb, and stacked them by size the way her father used to stack receipts on Sunday nights. 43. She had told herself 60. 60 would have meant something. 43 meant she would move a number from one column to another and pretend the math had changed. Behind her, the walk-in cooler hummed and clicked. The Bell and Time night kitchen was hers alone after 10, and she liked it better empty. No one to watch her wipe the same square of counter twice. No one to hear the small sound she made when her back gave out at the base of the spine. She wrapped the last of the roasted chicken in butcher paper. Not for a guest. For the container. Her feet had stopped being feet somewhere around the 9th hour. That was normal now. She rocked her weight from heel to toe the way the older cooks had taught her, kept the blood moving, kept the ache from setting in the same joint twice. 3 years on this line had rebuilt her body into a tool that ran on very little. She ate standing. She drank water from the same dented cup. She had learned every trick a kitchen teaches a person who cannot afford to be sick, and she had learned them so well that the tricks had become the shape of her life. The container sat by her bag on the prep shelf, stainless steel, dented on one corner from the night it fell off the truck her father used to drive. She had carried it every shift for 3 years. Colleagues thought it held her dinner. It did, some nights. Tonight it held chicken she had not been paid for and would not eat. The office light was still on. Simone knew that light. She knew what it meant when Dwight left it burning past close. It meant he wanted to be found working, so that whatever he said next would sound like a man too busy to be cruel. She knocked once on the frame. "You counted the drawer?" Dwight did not look up from his screen. He had a way of asking questions he already knew the answer to. Counted it twice. It balances. It balanced last Thursday, too. Then it didn't. He clicked something. Funny how that works. Simone stood in the doorway with the container against her hip. Thursday was the card reader. Corporate said so in the email. You were copied. Now he looked up, reading glasses low on his nose, a man of 50-something who owned 4 of these places and treated each one like it had personally disappointed him. You read my email? You forwarded it to the whole staff. Something crossed his face and left. The point, he said, is that I've got a girl closing my flagship who argues about a card reader instead of saying thank you for the shift. The word girl landed where he aimed it. Simone felt her jaw set. She kept her voice level, because level was the only weapon she could afford. I'm asking about the December schedule, she said. You told me doubles. I planned around doubles. I told you maybe doubles. You said? I said maybe. He took the glasses off, and that was worse, because now he was giving her his full attention, and his full attention was a small, mean thing. Simone, you're good on the line. Nobody's saying you're not good on the line. But good on the line and running your mouth are 2 different resumes. She thought of her mother's kitchen table. She thought of the envelope on it, the one from the surgical center, the number printed in a font that did not care. "I need the hours," she said, quiet. It cost her to say it that quiet. Dwight leaned back. The chair took his weight with a complaint. "Everybody needs the hours." And that was the whole conversation. She had rehearsed it 3 ways on the drive-in, and none of the 3 had mattered, because he had never once intended to give her anything except the feeling of having asked. "Lock the back," he said, turning to the screen again. "And Simone, the apron goes in the wash, not your bag." 3rd time I've mentioned it. She had never once taken an apron home. She said nothing. Saying nothing was the last dignity in the room, and she took it with both hands. She thought of the thing she wanted to say and did not say it. That she had closed his flagship alone for a year, that the reviews he screenshotted for corporate came off her line, that the girl who ran her mouth was the reason his drawer balanced at all, because she caught the errors the day crew left and fixed them without a word so no one would get written up. She swallowed all of it. A person could not eat pride, and a person could not pay rent with the satisfaction of being right. And Simone had done that arithmetic so many times it no longer felt like losing. It felt like breathing. "Was there anything else?" she said. "Not a question either." Dwight waved a hand at her without turning around. Dismissed. She took the dismissal the way she had taken the shift, the way she took everything now, and she left before her face could do something she would regret. Outside, the cold had teeth. The staff door opened onto the industrial lot behind the building, and the lot was where the city stopped pretending. Cracked asphalt. A chain-link fence sagging toward the loading bays across the way. 2 sodium lamps, one dead, one buzzing orange over a landscape of dumpsters and stacked pallets, and the long, low warehouse that took up the whole far side. Simone pulled her jacket tight and started across. She walked this lot every night at midnight because parking behind the restaurant was free and parking on the street was not, and $11 a night was $300 a month, and $300 a month was a thing she could not spend. So she walked. Fast, keys threaded through her fingers the way her father had shown her, container under her arm. Her phone lit against her leg. She already knew. "You up?" Her mother. Then, before she could answer, a second bubble. "Don't worry about me tonight. Sleep, baby." Which meant her mother was awake and worried and pretending not to be, the same performance Simone had just watched Dwight give in reverse. Everyone in her life performing the opposite of what they felt to spare somebody. She stopped walking. She typed, "Almost home. Take your pill." She did not type the number from the envelope. She had not said that number out loud to her mother yet. 11,000 for the surgeon, and that was the discounted rate, the cash rate, the one that came with a woman on the phone who said, "We do have financing options," in a voice trained to sound like mercy. 11,000 for the surgery, and under it, older, heavier, the other number. Her father's debt. Raymond Carter had died with a company and a name and a stack of paper nobody could read but him, and the paper had come after him the way paper does, patient and legal and endless. Carter Transportation. Trucks and routes and a license and a list of people he owed. Simone had been 22. She was 25 now, and she still got letters addressed to the estate of R. Carter. And every letter was a small door opening onto a room she could not afford to enter. She started walking again. That was when she heard the chain. Not a bark. That was the thing that had first stopped her, weeks ago, and stopped her again now. Every warehouse dog in this district barked. They threw themselves at fences and screamed at anything with a heartbeat. This one did not. The sound was only the drag of a chain across concrete, a shifting of weight. And when Simone turned her head toward the loading bays, there he was, at the edge of the orange light, watching her. The dog. The locals called him Monster, and she understood why the first time she saw the shape of him. Large, deep through the chest, all black in the dark, with a short coat that caught faint copper where the lamp hit it. Erect ears, a body built for one purpose and starved down toward another. His ribs showed. Even at 40 feet she could see them, the long ladder of them under the black, and something in her chest pulled tight and would not let go. He was chained near the corner of the warehouse, close to a single steel shipping container set apart from the others. Not moving, just his eyes, dark and level, tracking her across the lot. Simone stopped. She should not have stopped. Every rule she had ever been given about being a woman crossing a dark lot alone said keep moving, keep the keys, keep the distance. She knew a man had once been bitten here badly enough to need the hospital. She knew the warehouse belonged to people the neighborhood did not ask questions about. She knew all of it. She stopped anyway, because the dog was not lunging. A lunging dog she would have understood. A lunging dog was fear-wearing teeth, and she had spent her whole life reading fear on faces and knowing what to do with it. This was different. This animal held his ground at the exact end of his chain and looked at her with a patience that did not belong on something that hungry. He was not guarding the container. He was tethered. Beside it, close enough to smell whatever it held, far enough that the chain kept him from it. He was starving next to something. That was the shape of it. She could not have said how she knew, only that she did, the way you know the difference between a person who is quiet because they are calm and a person who is quiet because they have decided you will not see them break. Hey, she said, soft, stupid. She said it anyway. The ears moved. One flick toward her voice. Nothing else. Simone crouched, slow, the container coming down off her hip to rest against her knee. 40 feet was nothing to a dog. If he came, the chain might reach, and it might not, and she had no plan for either. Her heart was going hard. She stayed down. You're not going to do it, are you? She said. You're not going to give them the show. The dog's gaze dropped, once, to the steel at her knee. Then came back up to her face, and she felt it land, that look, felt it go straight past the part of her that read fear and hit the older part, the part that had been starved next to a table full of food she could not touch for 3 years, while men in offices told her. Everybody needs the hours. A scar rode the top of his muzzle, thin and pale, old. Somebody hurt you, Simone said. She stayed crouched. Her knees complained against the cold asphalt and she ignored them. There was a thing happening between her and the animal that she did not have a word for, and she was afraid that if she moved, she would break it. He had not stepped back. A dog that wanted nothing to do with you stepped back. A dog that wanted to hurt you came forward. He did neither. He held the exact middle, the way she held the exact middle in Dwight's office, the posture of a creature that has learned that both wanting and refusing get punished, so it does neither out loud. I know, she said. She did not know what she knew. She said it anyway, low, the way you talk to something that cannot answer. I know, me too. The chain shifted. He lowered his head a fraction, not a bow, not a threat, just a settling. And for 1 second, the orange light caught the wet of his eye, and she saw herself reflected small in it, a woman crouched in a lot with a steel box against her knee, saying, Me too. To a dog. The far door of the warehouse opened. Light spilled yellow across the loading bay, and a man stepped into it, big, unhurried, a phone at his ear. Simone rose fast and turned her shoulder to him, and made herself into what she was supposed to be, a woman walking to her car, nothing to see. She did not look back at the dog. Looking back was the mistake. She walked, but she heard it. Behind her, low, a single word from the man in a language she did not speak, sharp with command. And the chain went still, not a whimper, not a bark. The dog obeyed a stranger's voice in a tongue she would learn to recognize before this was over, and she did not know that yet, and she kept walking toward her car with the container cold against her ribs. Her car started on the second try. She sat for a moment with her hands on the wheel and her breath fogging the glass, and she did the thing she had trained herself not to do, which was to look in the mirror. In the orange dark, the dog was a shape at the end of a chain, facing the container, motionless. She pulled out of the lot. The drive home was 19 minutes. She knew it was 19 minutes because she had timed it against the gas gauge, against how much of a quarter tank 19 minutes cost, against everything now, because everything was a number she could not stop converting. Her mother's apartment was on the second floor of a building that had been nice in a decade Simone was too young to remember. The stairwell light was out again. She climbed in the dark by feel, container in one hand, keys in the other, and let herself in quiet. Gloria was asleep in the chair. Not the bed. The chair, by the window, a blanket to her chin, and the television murmuring blew across her face with the sound off. She had waited up and lost. On the side table sat her water, her pills in the plastic organizer with the little doors, and the envelope, face down, the way you turn a photograph of someone you miss. Simone set the container on the counter without a sound. She stood over her mother in the blue light and looked at the shoulder-length hair gone through with gray, the round face slack now and younger for it, the small medical bracelet loose on the wrist. 52 years old. 30 of them spent inside a school, keeping other people's children on the right side of the line, and this was the room it had bought her, and her heart was the thing failing now. The valve the surgeon's letter named in a word, Simone had looked up twice, and still could not make sound survivable. She did not wake her. For a moment she just watched her breathe. Up, and the blanket rose. Down, and it fell. There had been a night, 6 weeks ago, when the rise and the fall had not been even, when Gloria had gripped the arm of that same chair and gone gray at the lips and told Simone it was heartburn. It was nothing. Sit down. You're scaring yourself. The emergency room had put a different word to it. The word had a valve in it and a percentage and a recommendation, and the recommendation had a price, and the price was the envelope on the side table now, turned face down like a thing too bright to look at. She eased the blanket up over the loose bracelet. She turned the television off. She picked up the pill organizer and checked the little door marked with the day, and found it still shut, the evening dose uncatton, and she understood without being told that her mother had skipped it, and she understood why. The pills were a number 2. "Mama," she said, barely. Gloria did not stir. Simone put the organizer down and did not open the door and did not wake her to make her take it, because tomorrow's dose and tonight's dose were the same small pile of impossible, and one more skipped pill would not be the thing that broke, and she needed her mother to sleep. She would fight the pharmacy in the morning. She would fight all of it in the morning. Morning was where she kept the fights. She went to the kitchen and opened the container and stood looking at chicken she had wrapped for a starving animal chained in a lot she should never have stopped in. She had started bringing it 2 weeks ago. She thought about that now, leaning on the counter in her mother's dark kitchen. 2 weeks. The first night she had left a scrap by the fence and driven off ashamed, certain she was being a fool, certain the dog would not touch food from a stranger's hand, certain the men would see. The second night the scrap was gone. She had told herself a rat took it. The third night she had watched from her car, low in the seat, and seen the black shape stretch to the very last link of the chain, seen him take the food she had set down, seen him back away and lie down again facing the container, as if the meal changed nothing, as if he had a job, and the job was the container, and hunger was simply the weather he worked in. She did not know why the container. She only knew that the dog was chained beside one steel box among many, and that he was starved to the ribs while men came and went from the warehouse eating, and that whatever was in that box was worth keeping a dog too hungry to sleep and too disciplined to break. She was learning his commands. She had not meant to. But you could not sit in a lot for 2 weeks without hearing the men call to him. The same short sounds, the same language. And one afternoon on her phone between prep and service, she had typed the sounds into a search box the way she heard them, and found they were Korean, and found what they meant. Sit, stay, down, enough. And she had written them phonetic on the back of a receipt, and put the receipt in her wallet next to the letters from the estate. She could not have said what she thought she would do with them. She only knew she wanted the dog to hear a voice that wanted nothing from him. The chicken went into the smaller tub, the one for tomorrow. She washed the container by hand, dried it, set it by her bag for the next night. Her hands knew the ritual. Her hands had been doing rituals over that steel box since before she understood she was doing them. She should sleep. She had the lunch prep at 10 and the dinner service after, and the long walk across the lot at midnight. Again, the way it went, the way it had gone for 3 years and would keep going. Instead, she sat down at her mother's table, in the blue light, and turned the envelope over. Cardiovascular Surgical Associates. The window with her mother's name in it. She did not open it. She had opened it 4 days ago, and the number had not changed and would not change from being looked at. Under it in the little wire rack were the other envelopes, the older ones, the ones addressed to the estate, to the name that used to drive the truck the container had fallen from, and she pulled one of those instead, because a wound you have carried for 3 years is easier to hold at midnight than a wound 11 days old. Carter Transportation, LLC. In collection. Her father's signature was in these somewhere, on the originals, the loops of the R he had shown her how to make when she was small enough to sit in his lap at this same table while he stacked receipts. He had been a big man with careful hands and eyes she saw now in the mirror, and he had died owing people money and owning a company that still, somehow, 3 years later, had not finished dying, kept sending its paper, kept its license current in some drawer downtown she had never seen, as if the business were a body that would not admit the heart had stopped. She had never understood the paper. That was the truth she kept from her mother. Her father had built something with wheels and roots and codes and men, and he had died before he could hand her the key to reading it, and everything he left behind spoke a language she could sound out but not translate, the way she could now say, "Stay," and "Enough." To a chained dog without knowing the shape of the world those words came from. She put the letter back. She did not cry. She had a system for not crying that involved the exact number of things left to do before she could lie down, and she counted them now, and there were 4, and she did them. She took off her boots. She hung the camel jacket she had not worn tonight because tonight was a kitchen night, and kitchen nights she wore black and an apron, and the jacket waited on its hook for the days she needed to be a person and not a function. She set her alarm. She checked her mother's breathing from the doorway, slow and even in the chair, and let her stay there rather than wake her into pain. Then she lay down on the couch that had been her bed for 8 months, since she gave up her own place to cover her mother's, and she stared at the ceiling and did the thing she did every night, which was not to pray exactly, but to run the numbers one more time in the dark, as if this time they might come out different. $43, $11,000 for the surgeon, an older number under that with her father's name on it, growing quietly the way debt grows, in a language she could not read. A dog chained beside a steel box in a lot she crossed every midnight, starving and disciplined, and looking at her like he knew something she had not been told. She did not know that the box the dog guarded had her father's name inside it. She turned toward the back of the couch and closed her eyes and told herself she would not stop in the lot tomorrow night. She had told herself that for 14 nights. Tomorrow night she would take off the apron before she crossed. She would let her hair down out of the tie it lived in through service. She would kneel at the fence like a person and not a shadow, and she would say the Korean words off the back of the receipt in her wallet in a voice that wanted nothing, and she would find out whether a starved and perfect animal would take food from her open hand. She did not know who would be watching when she did. The next night she left the apron on the passenger seat. She had folded it before she understood she was folding it, the way she folded everything now, with the corners lined up and the ties tucked under, and then she sat in the dark of the car with both hands on the wheel and did not turn the key back. The lot was empty at the far end. One sodium light buzzed over the loading bay. She had parked closer than usual, 3 spaces from the fence line, close enough that she could hear the chain when the dog shifted his weight. She pulled the band out of her hair. It came down in a slow weight against her neck, and she shook it once, and that small, ordinary motion felt like taking off armor she had forgotten she wore. She looked at herself in the rearview mirror for 1 second. Then she stopped looking. The container was warm against her ribs when she lifted it off the floor mat. Chicken from 2 nights, rice she had rinsed until the starch ran clear. A little of the broth she skimmed the fat from, because a dog that thin could not hold rich food. She had read that on a forum at 3 in the morning, a woman in Ohio who fostered strays writing about refeeding, about how a starved body will kill itself on a full meal. So she went slow. She always went slow. She crossed the asphalt with the container in both hands and her keys nowhere near her fingers. That was the difference tonight. Every other night the keys had lived between her knuckles, points out, a woman crossing a dark lot the way her mother had taught her. Tonight her hands were full and open and useless as weapons, and she had decided that on purpose, because a body cannot ask for trust while it is armed. The dog would smell the change on her before he saw it. Everything about him was built to read what a person's hands were doing. He was already watching her. He stood at the center of his chain, exactly where he always stood, neither forward nor back, his head low and level and his ears up. The old scar over his muzzle caught the light. She stopped at the edge of what the chain allowed, and set the container down and did not push it toward him. Anja, she said. The word came out of her mouth wrong, and then right, the way it did every time, the shape of it still foreign in her teeth. She had written it on a receipt weeks ago, spelled the way it sounded, and she said it now the way she had practiced against the steering wheel on the drive over. Sit. His back end folded. Slow, grudging, an animal doing a thing he had decided to do rather than a thing he was made to do. She lowered herself the rest of the way to the ground. Not a crouch this time. She put one knee down on the cold asphalt, then the other, and she sat back on her heels with her spine soft and her chin down, making herself small, making herself no taller than he was. The cold came up through her trousers immediately. She ignored it. She pushed the container forward 6 inches with 2 fingers and took her hand back. Miog io, she said. Eat. He did not move toward it. His nose worked. She could see it, the wet flare of it, pulling the smell of the broth off the night air, and she could see the want in him, the way his weight rocked a half-inch onto his front feet and rocked back. 14 nights she had done this. 14 nights, and he had eaten only after she stood and walked away, only when she was a shape retreating and no longer a face he had to account for. She had made peace with that. She had told herself the eating was the thing, not the watching her eat, and she had believed it most nights. Tonight she stayed on her knees. I'm not going anywhere, she told him, low in English, the words that were only for her. You can look all you want. His ears swiveled. Not at her, past her. Stadanaft. She heard the car a half-second after the dog did. Tires on the seam where the lot met the service road, slow, deliberate, no radio, no hurry. Headlights swept the fence and pulled the shadows of the chain link long across the asphalt and then died. A door. One door, heavy, closing on a car built so the door would sound like that. Footsteps on grit. Every instinct she had said, stand up, pick up the box, be a woman who dropped something and is walking to her car. She had done it before. She had done it 4 nights ago when a man came out of the warehouse on the phone, folded herself into the shape of nobody, and let him pass. She stayed down. She stayed down because the dog had not broken. If she moved fast, the dog would read her fear, and the chain would come alive, and whoever this was would see a strange woman crouched at the gate of a place she had no business near, and the story would end there, badly, tonight. So she kept her knees on the ground and her hands loose, and she turned her head, slow, the way you turn towards something you are not afraid of. He was tall. That was the first fact. Before the light, before anything. He came out of the dark between 2 shipping containers and the buzzing bay light found him in pieces. The width of him first, shoulders that changed the shape of the gap he walked through, then the black shirt cut so close it read almost like skin, then the face. He was looking at the dog. Not at her, at the dog, and at the steel container 6 inches from the dog's feet, and at the way the dog was sitting. He had stopped walking. He had stopped the way a man stops when the floor is not where he expected the floor to be. Hades, he said. The dog's tail moved. Once. A single sweep of it against the asphalt, and then the animal looked back at Simone, back at the man, back at Simone, and did the thing dogs are not supposed to be able to do, which is show a person that a decision is being weighed. The man said something else. Korean, she knew it now, the way she knew her own name, 3 weeks of it in her ears, and this was not sit, or stay, or down, or enough. This was lower, and faster, and had a question folded into the end of it. The dog rose, went to the man, pressed the side of his head against the man's leg, once, and the man's hand came down onto the black skull without the man seeming to decide to do it, and the whole time his eyes stayed on the steel container. He ate from you, the man said. English now. Accented, careful, each consonant set down like a man laying tile. It was not a question, and it was not quite a statement. It was a man saying a thing aloud to find out if it could be true. He hasn't, Simone said. Not yet. He waits till I leave. You've done this before. She weighed it. Her mother's voice in her head said give a stranger nothing, and her father's voice, older and quieter, said a man who loves his dog is not the worst kind of man. She split the difference. 2 weeks, she said. He won't take it from my hand. He waits. The man crouched. He did it slowly, folding down to the dog's level the way she had folded down, and it should have made him smaller and did not. Up close, the light found the right side of his neck. Black ink and something metallic worked into it, a shape that started below his ear and ran down under the open collar of the shirt. The head of it pointed up toward his jaw. She had seen enough now to stop cataloging faces and start cataloging what faces meant, and this was a thing men in her father's business had whispered about, and men in Dwight's kitchen had joked about, without knowing what they joked about. She kept her eyes off it. She kept her eyes on the dog. "This dog," the man said, and rested his palm flat on the container lid, "takes food from no one." He turned the lid a quarter inch, testing the seal, not opening it. "Not my men, not the vet, not me, from a stranger's hand, not once in 4 years." He looked up at her. "And he sits for you." "I fed him slow," she said. "I read about it. Starved dogs, you can't just—" "Where did you learn the words?" The question came flat and fast, and it changed the temperature of the whole exchange. She felt it land in her chest. "What words?" she said, and heard how thin it came out. "Anja, miogio." He said them cleanly, the way they were supposed to sound, and next to his, the ones in her mouth were a child's tracing over a letter. "My dog answers to 5 words, and you have 3 of them. Where?" "I heard them," she said. "The men here. At night. I wrote them down." "You wrote them down." His weight had shifted, barely, an inch forward, onto the balls of his feet, the posture of a man who has stopped listening to be polite and started listening to catch something. She recognized it because she had spent 2 weeks reading exactly that shift in the dog. The two of them, man and animal, had the same economy of motion, the same way of going quiet right before they decided what a thing was. On a receipt. Her hand had already moved toward her jacket before she caught it, and she stopped it, and she saw him see her stop it. "In my wallet. I heard them say the words and I wrote how they sounded so I could—" She stopped. The next word was true, and she did not want to give it to him. She gave it to him anyway, so he'd have somebody. The man went still. The dog had settled between them, half against the man's knee and half turned toward Simone, and the man's hand kept moving over the black coat in a slow, absent rhythm, and for a moment, the only sound in the lot was that, a palm on fur, and the far buzz of the light. He was looking at her now, the way he had looked at the container, recalculating. She had the sense of being read down to a depth she had not agreed to. "Stand up," he said. She did not move. "Why?" "Because you're kneeling on cold ground and I'm going to look at you and I don't look down at people." He rose as he said it, unfolding to his full height, and he held out a hand. Not to help her, she understood, but as a fixed point, something to rise against if she chose to use it. She did not take it. She put her palm flat on the cold asphalt and pushed herself up on her own, the way she had gotten up off floors her whole life, and she came to her feet in front of him with her chin level. He was a head and a half taller. She refused to feel it. "What's your name?" he said. "Yours first." Something moved at the corner of his mouth that was not a smile and was in the neighborhood of one. The dog looked up at the change in the air between them. "Kang Ji-won," he said. The name meant nothing to her, and she let it mean nothing, kept her face a closed door, and only later, hours later, on the sofa with the ceiling above her, would she reach back into this moment and feel the floor drop, because she would have heard the name by then in a context that turned it into a blade. For now it was 2 syllables and a stranger's watchful eyes. "Simone," she said. "Carter." His hand stopped on the dog. It was a small thing and she almost missed it. Would have missed it a month ago before all these nights of learning to read an animal that only spoke in wait and stillness. The palm stopped, just for a breath. Then it moved again, and his face gave up nothing, and if she had not spent 2 weeks learning to see the thing under the stillness, she would have sworn nothing had happened at all. "Carter," he said. "Is that a problem?" "No," he said it too quickly, and then heard himself say it too quickly, and he set the next words down slower, back to laying tile. "It's a common name." "It is," she agreed, and did not believe him, and did not know why she did not believe him. The dog stood up. He put himself between them, not with aggression, with something more like ceremony, turning a slow half-circle so that his body touched both of them at once, her knee and the man's shin, and then he sat again, facing out toward the fence, the posture of an animal on watch. Neither of them had told him to. Jiwon looked down at the dog for a long moment and Simone watched him look, and she understood that whatever had just happened between the three of them was not small, and that the man knew it was not small, and that he was a man who did not like being handed things he had not chosen. "You should take your box," he said. "He hasn't eaten. He'll eat." Jiwon looked at the container, then at her. "Now I think, with you standing there." He said something to the dog, low, and the dog's ears came forward, and Jiwon nodded at the steel between them. "Try." She crouched again, slower this time, aware of being watched by two sets of eyes, and she thumbed the seal and lifted the lid, and the smell of the broth came up warm into the cold. She did not push it. She just opened it and set her hands back on her thighs and said the word. "Miyagi-o." The dog looked at Jiwon. Jiwon said nothing, gave nothing, stood with his hands at his sides and let it be her word and not his. And the dog ate. He crossed the 6 inches he had never crossed in her presence, put his head down into the container, and ate. Not frantic, not the way a starved animal should eat, but steady, deliberate, a creature that had decided the food and the woman were both safe in the same moment. Simone stayed absolutely still and felt something climb up the back of her throat that she had not budgeted for, and she pressed her lips together and let it pass. It was a stupid thing to feel. A dog had eaten, that was all, but she had spent 14 nights being the shape that fed him, and then the shape that walked away, and she had told herself the walking away did not cost her anything, and it turned out it had been costing her the whole time. Above her, the man watched his dog eat from a stranger's box, and he did not say anything for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice had come down out of the flat register into something she had not heard from him yet. "He was chained here when I bought this yard," he said. "The last owner left him. Wouldn't come off the chain for anyone. We kept him fed. We kept him working." He watched the black head move in the container. "I told myself he was loyal. Now I think he was only waiting to see who would sit down on the ground with him." "That's not loyalty," Simone said. "That's survival." They looked the same from the outside. He looked at her then, and it was not the reading look anymore. It was something quicker and more surprised. A man hearing a sentence he might have said himself, come out of a mouth he had already decided he knew. 4 years, he said finally, quiet, almost to himself. "I raised him from a pup." "He's careful," Simone said. "He's not mean. People think he's mean." "He is mean." Jiwon's voice had no heat in it. "To the right people, that's the job." He crouched down again beside her, close now, close enough that she could see the silver in the tattoo was not silver, but a paler gray worked into the black to make the scales, and she looked away from it before she could be caught looking. "He is not careful. Careful is not a thing I trained into him. Careful is what he does with you, and I don't know why, and I don't like not knowing why." "Then don't feed him yourself," she said, before she could stop it. "Feed him slow. Sit on the ground. Let him wait till he's ready." He turned his head and looked at her. "You're telling me how to handle my own dog?" "You asked why he's careful with me. I'm telling you." She met the look and held it. She had spent all night being small for the animal, and she was done being small. "You feed him because you own him. I fed him because he was hungry, and nobody else was going to. He knows the difference. Dogs always know the difference." The lot went quiet except for the sound of the dog finishing the broth. She had gone too far and she knew it, could feel it, the way you feel the edge of a stair in the dark, and she braced for whatever a man like this did when a woman like her said a thing like that. What he did was nothing. He crouched there in the cold with his forearms on his knees and looked at her like she was a document that had come to him in a language he half read, and the almost smile came back and went away, and the dog finished eating and lifted his head and pressed his broth-wet muzzle against Simone's shoulder, and she let him, and the man watched that too. "Jiwon?" a voice called. From the warehouse, a man in the lit doorway, and behind him another, both of them still, both of them looking at the picture the three of them made at the gate, the boss on his heels beside a black woman in a blue top with her hair down, and the dog that bit strangers leaning its head on her like she was the wall it had been posted to guard. Nobody moved for a second. Then Jiwon rose in a single motion, and the temperature of him changed. The whole shape of him changed. The softness around the dog folding back into something flat and closed. and she saw for the first time what the men in the doorway saw when they looked at him. "Go home," he told her, not unkindly, without looking at her, his eyes on his men. She wanted to argue with the go home, out of pure reflex, out of a whole life of being told to leave rooms she had done the work of holding up. She swallowed it. The men in the doorway were not looking at her, the way men in doorways usually looked at her. They were looking at the dog leaning on her, and she understood that in this place, tonight, that was a stranger thing than a woman being where she was not supposed to be. She capped the container, stood, tucked it under her arm where it had ridden 1,000 nights. "He'll want the same time tomorrow," she said. "Broth, not much meat. He can't hold rich food yet." That turned his head. "You're planning to come back." "He's not fixed," she said. 2 weeks of slow doesn't fix 2 years of starving. I don't leave things half done." He looked at her for a moment she would remember longer than she wanted to. The 2 men waiting in the light behind him. The dog sitting between the woman and the boss with its ears up. The cold coming down over all of them. "The gate's locked at 11, he said. "I'll leave it." She should have said no. She had a mother in a chair 19 minutes away and $11,000 she did not have, and a debt in her father's name she could not read, and she had no room in her life for a locked gate a mafia man left open for her. She knew all of that standing there in the cold. 11, she said. "Fine." She walked to her car with the container under her arm and her hair down and her hands empty of keys, and she did not look back at the gate, and she felt him watch her the whole way, and she felt the dog watch her too, and somewhere under both of those things, without a name for it yet, she felt the ground of her ordinary starving life tilt a single degree and begin, very slowly, to slide. She started the car. She sat with her hands on the wheel. In the mirror, the 2 men had gone back inside, and Ji-won stood alone at the gate with his dog, and he was not looking at her car anymore. He was looking down at the ground where the steel container had sat, at the spot on the asphalt, at nothing, the way a man looks at a place where something he thought he understood had just stopped being true. She could not have known what he was thinking. She had no way to know that the name she had given him, Carter, was stamped inside the very box his dog had been chained to guard for 4 years, or that he had spent those years not knowing whose name it was, any more than she knew whose dog it belonged to. She only knew he had gone still when she said it. She pulled out of the lot and onto the service road and drove the 19 minutes home with the radio off, and the whole way her hand kept drifting to the wallet in her jacket, to the receipt where 3 Korean words were spelled the way they sounded, and she kept thinking about the way the man had said them right, cleanly, like they belonged to him, because they did. She let herself in quiet. Gloria was in the chair again. Simone stood in the dark of her mother's living room with the container still under her arm and looked at the woman sleeping upright in a house they were 9 days of bad luck from losing, and she thought about a locked gate a stranger was going to leave open for her, and she did not wake her mother, and she did not put the box down for a long time. Then she set it on the counter, and she washed her hands, and she took out her wallet, and she looked at the receipt, and under the 3 words she had spelled out weeks ago, in the same small, careful hand she used for everything she did not want to forget, she wrote one more thing. A name, 2 syllables, and beside it, because she did not yet know what else to call him, one word she would spend the next many nights trying to unlearn. Owner. The receipt stayed in her wallet for 3 nights before she took it out again, and by then the word she had written on it had stopped meaning what she thought it meant. She kept the schedule. 11. The gate unlocked, the dog waiting closer to the fence each night than the last. On the 4th night, Hades did not wait for the command at all. He came the moment her boots hit the asphalt, ears up, tail low and moving, and pressed the flat of his skull against her thigh hard enough to move her half a step. She braced a hand on his shoulder to stay upright. The container was still under her arm. She had brought broth again. Less meat, the way she'd told Ji-won to feed him. The warehouse door was dark. She noticed that before she noticed anything else. No men in the light, no light. "He's inside," Ji-won said. He came out from the same gap between the containers he always used, and she was starting to understand that he did that on purpose, that he never let her see which door he'd come through. He had a folder under his arm, not a phone, not the closed, dangerous posture he'd worn when the 2 men called his name. Something else tonight. "Feed him first," he said. "He won't listen to either of us until you do." She knelt. She gave the command, opened the lid, held the container while the dog ate, and Jiwon watched the way a man watches something he still can't explain to himself. When Hades finished, he sat between them without being told, facing the fence, and Jiwon looked at the container in her hands like he had decided something. "That's yours," he said. "The steel one. Where did you get it?" "It fell off my father's truck, years ago." She wiped the rim with her thumb. "Why?" He didn't answer that. He opened the folder instead, and turned it so the fence light caught it, and he held out a single photograph. Not a document, a photograph of a document. "Look at this, tell me if you know it." She took it because refusing would have meant more talking, and she was tired of talking to him standing up. It was a photo of a metal tag, a seal, the kind that clamps a truck's rear doors shut, stamped with a number and 2 letters, and a small pressed logo she had seen 1,000 times as a child on the side of a cab, on the pocket of a shirt, on the return address of every envelope that now came addressed to the estate of a dead man. CT. Carter Transportation. Her thumb went still on the edge of the photo. "Where did you get this?" she said. "There's a box." He nodded once toward the containers behind him, toward the dark. "The one he was chained to. It's full of them. Hundreds. All the same 2 letters. He watched her face, and she hated that he was good at watching faces. "I bought this yard 8 months ago. The seals were already here. The dog was already here. I didn't know what the letters meant until you told me your name." She heard it then, the thing the narrator of her own life had been keeping from her. The sentence she had walked past for 2 weeks with a container of leftover chicken in her hands. The dog had been guarding her father's name the whole time, and she had been kneeling 12 feet away from it, starving beside it, and she had not known. She stood up. Her knees were wet from the asphalt. "Show me." He didn't move at first. "It's not a small thing, Simone. Once you see it, you can't hand it back. I fed your dog for 2 weeks, not knowing his name meant my name." Her voice didn't rise. It went flat, which was worse, and she saw him register that too. "Show me the box." He led her between the stacks. Hades walked at her hip, not his. The container they stopped at was older than the others, rust at the corner seams, a padlock that had been cut once and replaced. Jiwon worked the new lock, swung the door, and put a light on it. Steel tags, loose, in crates, in torn plastic sacks, spilled across the floor like gravel. Every one of them stamped CT. She crouched and picked one up and turned it in the light, and her father's logo pressed cold into her palm. And she thought about the letters at the apartment, the ones she had never been able to read. The license she'd been told sat alive in a drawer downtown when the company was 3 years dead. "These are used," she said, not a question. She'd grown up around trucks. She knew a broken seal from a factory one. "They've been cut. Every one of these has been on a truck and cut off a truck." "Yes. My father's company doesn't run. It hasn't run since he died." She stood with the tag still in her fist. "So who's been putting his seals on trucks?" Jiwon looked at her for a long moment, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked like he wished he had less information, not more. "That," he said, "is what I want to pay you to find out." She laughed. It came out wrong, one hard sound with no humor in it, and Hades's ears went back at the noise. "Pay me. I have records I can't read." He said it plainly, the way she'd admitted the same thing to a letter on her mother's kitchen table 3 nights ago and told no one. "Port manifests, container numbers, route codes, times. They mean nothing to me. They meant nothing to the people I paid before you, because they didn't grow up in the cab of a Carter truck learning what the codes stood for." He nodded at her fist. "You did. I heard it in one sentence. You knew that seal was cut before I told you." "I'm a cook." "You're a cook who taught a dog that trusts no one to eat from your hand by reading a forum and writing Korean on a receipt." He didn't smile. "Don't tell me what you are. I've been watching what you do." She put the tag down, carefully, like it was hot. "You're the White Serpent," she said. The name landed between them, and the dog felt it, shifting his weight, looking up at both of them. Jiwon's hand went to the animal's head, an old reflex, steadying himself as much as the dog. "You know that name." "Everyone at the Port District knows that name. I serve their kids sandwiches." She held his eyes. "I looked at your neck the first night, and I told myself I didn't see it. I saw it. Then you know what I am. I know what people say you are." She wiped her palm on her jeans. I don't take money from men like that. I have a mother with a bad heart and a name I'd like to keep clean, since it's the only thing my father left me that isn't in collections. She turned to go. She got 4 steps. The trucks are running under his license, G1 said behind her. Right now. This week. Somebody kept Carter Transportation legally alive so they could hang cargo off a dead man's paperwork, and when it goes wrong, and it's going to go wrong, the name on every document is going to be Carter. Not mine. Not theirs. His. Yours. She stopped. You can walk home, he said. You can feed the dog and keep your clean name, and in 6 months a federal officer is going to knock on your mother's door and ask her to explain her husband's signature on a manifest he couldn't have signed because he was dead. Or you can read the records with me and find out who's writing his name before they do it again. Hades left him. The dog crossed the 10 feet of asphalt and sat down against her leg, deliberate, and she looked down at him and then back at the man who owned him and understood she'd already lost the argument the first night she knelt on the ground for something that wasn't hers. I won't work for you, she said. Then work for a contract, not for me. He was already ahead of her. She could hear it. A consulting agreement, an audit, your name on paper, your hours, your fee, reviewed by a lawyer you choose. You never touch anything but the records. If you don't like a line in it, we don't sign it. A lawyer I choose. A lawyer you choose, he said. I'll pay her too. The lawyer she chose was named Evelyn Price, and Simone chose her because Evelyn had once gotten a line cook at Bell and Time, his back wages, without charging him a dime, and because she wore cobalt blue suits into a room, like she was daring it to say something. Simone called her at 8 the next morning from the alley behind the restaurant, on break, grease still on her forearms. Say that again, Evelyn said. Slower. Who wants to hire you? A man who owns a shipping yard. He has my father's company seals. He wants to pay me to read old freight records. A pause on the line. What's his name? Simone looked at the receipt in her free hand. She almost didn't say it. Kang Ji-won. The pause went longer. Come to my office at 6, Evelyn said. Don't sign anything. Don't shake on anything. And Simone, bring the receipt with the Korean on it. I want to see everything you've written down since this started. At 6, Simone sat in a chair that cost more than her car, while Evelyn read the draft contract line by line with a silver pen, tapping it against the desk between clauses. Ji-won had sent it by courier. It was 4 pages. Evelyn read all 4 twice. This is clean, she said finally, and she sounded irritated about it. This is cleaner than clean. He's given you an out on every clause. You can quit any day with no penalty. He can't direct your findings. He can't stop you reporting anything to anyone, including the authorities. That's here, in writing, initialed. She turned the page around. A man like the one you described does not write a contract like this by accident. He wrote it so you'd say yes. Which means he needs you more than you need him. So I shouldn't sign. I didn't say that. Evelyn set the pen down. I'm saying know your leverage. He's exposing his own operation to you on paper. That's not generosity. That's desperation dressed up nice. Somebody's using your father's name to move freight, and it scares a man who does not scare easily. She looked up. Does keeping your job matter to you? It's $11,000 of matter. Then here's what we add. Evelyn uncapped the pen. The work is off hours. It never touches your employment at the restaurant. He pays you as an independent consultant, weekly, in full, regardless of what you find or don't find. And every document you review, you photograph, and a copy goes in a safe I control. Not his safe, mine, she wrote as she talked. If this goes bad, you don't go down as the woman who worked for the serpent. You go down as the auditor who kept records and reported up. There's a difference, and the difference is a courtroom. Simone watched the silver pen move. You think it's going to go bad? I think, Evelyn said, that dead men don't sign freight manifests, and someone's been forging one for 3 years, and you're about to put your real signature next to his fake one. I want yours to be the honest name in the file when the file gets opened. She capped the pen. Now, the Korean on the receipt. Show me. Simone slid it across the desk. Evelyn read the phonetic scrawl, the commands, and below them, in Simone's own hand, the 2 words, Kang Ji-won, owner. Evelyn tapped owner. Cross that out, she said. As of tonight, he's not the owner of anything of yours. He's the client. Right client. Simone took the pen and drew a line through the word she'd spent 3 nights trying to unlearn, and wrote the new one under it, and something loosened in her chest that had been tight since the box swung open. They signed at the yard, not an office, because Jiwon said the records didn't leave the yard, and Evelyn said then the signing didn't either. Evelyn came in a cobalt suit and stood in the cold industrial lot like it owed her money and read the final contract out loud, clause by clause, while Jiwon stood with his hands loose at his sides and Hades sat between all 3 of them like a witness. The consultant may terminate at will, Evelyn read. The client may not restrict, edit, or delay the consultant's findings. You understand these terms. I wrote most of them, Jiwon said. She rewrote 4 of them. Evelyn didn't look up. All reviewed documents are photographed and duplicated to council-controlled storage. You understand this means I have copies of everything you show her. Everything. For the first time, Simone saw him hesitate. It was small, a half-second where his jaw set, and then released. Yes, he said. Sign there. She signs there. The dog doesn't sign anything. Evelyn produced 2 pens from her jacket, and Simone almost laughed, thinking of Victor Shaw's 2 identical pens, though she didn't know that name yet, didn't know it was coming. She signed. Jiwon signed. Evelyn photographed both signatures and both faces, and the date on Simone's phone and her own. Congratulations, Evelyn said flatly, sliding everything into a leather folder. You have a job you can talk about and a client you can't. I'll be a phone call away every night you're in this yard. If he ever tells you the records can't leave and your safety can't leave with them, you leave. Am I clear? You're clear, Simone said. Evelyn looked at Jiwon, a beat longer than she needed to. The seal on those tags is a company that's been dead 3 years. Whoever's using it thinks nobody's left who can read it. She nodded at Simone. They were wrong about her. I'd think hard about who else they were wrong about. She left in the cobalt suit and the cold, and her heels rang on the asphalt until the gate. The records were kept in a room off the back of the warehouse that Jiwon unlocked with a key he kept separate from all the others. Not a computer. Paper. Boxes of it. Banker's boxes. Freight going back years. And Simone stood in the doorway and understood why he'd failed to read it. It wasn't hidden. It was just a language. And it wasn't one he spoke. Port manifests here, he said, moving down the boxes. Container numbers. Bills of lading. And these. He pulled a folder. Route sheets. Times, codes, they're just numbers to me. She took the folder and opened it under the lamp, and the numbers weren't numbers to her. This isn't a code, she said quietly. This is a route. He came around the table. My father numbered his routes. Her finger moved down the column. He didn't use street names. He used a system. He made it up when I was a kid. The first digit is the yard he left from. The second pair is the corridor. The last letter is the shift driver's initial. She turned the page. See this. 714R, yard 7, corridor 14, driver R. Her voice caught on the letter, and she pushed through it. R was him, Raymond. He drove his own long hauls when he couldn't pay a second driver. This route sheet has him driving. When is it dated? She checked the top of the page, and the room got very quiet, and even Hades, lying in the doorway, lifted his head. Last March, she said. Raymond Carter had been dead 2 years last March. She set the page down very carefully, the way she'd set down the seal, and she put both hands flat on the table on either side of it and breathed. Somebody's driving routes under my father's initial, she said, using his numbering system, which means they didn't invent it. They learned it from him, or they got it from his papers. She looked up. Who has his papers, Jiwon? Because it isn't me. I couldn't read this until 30 seconds ago. I don't know. You bought a yard full of his cut seals 8 months ago, and you don't know. I bought a yard, he said. The seals came with it. The dog came with it. I've spent 8 months paying people who couldn't tell me what you just told me in 1 page. He put a hand on the table near hers, not touching. Now I have someone who can read it. That's why the contract is clean. I don't need to trap you. I need you to keep turning pages. She looked at his hand next to hers on her father's route sheet, at the serpent ring on it, at the ink starting under his collar, and then at the page between them, with a dead man's shift letter, dated to a spring he never saw. Hades got up from the doorway and crossed the room and lay down under the table between both their feet, his weight against her boot and against his, and neither of them moved away from the dog or from the page. "I'll keep turning pages," she said. "Under my contract. On my terms. And every one of them goes in Evelyn's safe." "Every one," he agreed. She pulled the next folder toward her. Outside the gate was locked at 11 and would stay locked, and inside the lamp burned over a table where a cook read a mafia boss his own records in her father's private language, and the dog that trusted no one had chosen the floor between them for his bed. "Bring me the port manifests," she said. He crossed to the boxes and set 3 of them on the table, and she started at the top and worked down, and he learned within the hour to stop asking her what each line meant and start writing down what she said. She'd talk half to herself. Container number, weight, corridor, gate time. He wrote it in a small, hard hand in a notebook she made him keep open where she could see it. "You're checking my math," he said once. "I'm checking your notes." She didn't look up. "Evelyn's rules. Everything I say, you write, I photograph the page, a copy goes to her. If your notebook ever says something I didn't say, we have a problem, and it won't be my problem." He almost smiled at that. She saw it out of the side of her eye and pretended she hadn't. The manifests were slower than the route sheets. The route sheets were her father's private language, and she read them like her own handwriting. The manifests were the port's language, official, printed, and she had to read those the way anyone would, line by line, looking for the place where the port's honest paper touched her father's dishonest ghost. She found the first one near 2 in the morning. "Here." She flattened a manifest and laid a route sheet beside it and put a finger on each. "This container comes through the port. Real. Weighed, logged, gate time-stamped. And this route sheet moves it out the same night under 714R. She looked up. "The port thinks a Carter truck picked it up. There is no Carter truck. There hasn't been a Carter truck since the repo yard took the last 2. So what pulled the container?" "Somebody's truck." She sat back, wearing my father's paperwork like a coat. Jiwon wrote it down. His hand stopped at the end of the line. "How many nights of this," he said, "before we know whose truck?" "As many as it takes." She pulled the notebook toward her, read what he'd written, nodded, pushed it back. "You want it fast. Fast is how people miss the thing that hangs them. My father used to say, you don't rush a load you can't afford to drop." Her thumb moved over the route sheet. "I'm not going to be the woman who dropped this one." Under the table, Hades shifted, resettled, put his chin across the toe of Jiwon's shoe and the side of his body against Simone's boot at the same time, claiming both of them at once. And neither of them said anything about it because there was nothing to say. The dog had made his arrangement. They were both inside it now. She worked 2 more hours. When she finally stood, her back had locked and the sky through the high window had gone from black to the flat gray that meant the restaurant was 4 hours away, and her mother was 1 bus stop and 1 skipped pill closer to a surgery Simone still couldn't pay for. She photographed the last page. She texted the copies to Evelyn, who answered in 10 seconds even at that hour. "Received, logged, go home." And Simone put her phone away. "You should sleep," Jiwon said. "I should cook. In 4 hours." She pulled her jacket on. "This is the second job, remember. The first one still owns my mornings." He walked her to the gate, which he didn't have to do, and Hades walked between them, which he insisted on. At the fence, Jiwon stopped. "The money's in your account tonight," he said. "The first week. Full, like the contract says, whether you found anything or not." She stopped with her hand on the gate. "I found something. You'd have been paid the same if you hadn't." He put a hand on the dog's head. "That's what the contract is for, so you never have to find something just to eat." She looked at him for a moment, at the man the whole port district called the White Serpent, standing in a cold lot at 5 in the morning, telling her she'd be paid for the truth even if the truth was nothing, and she filed it away with the clean 4-page contract and the out on every clause, another thing that didn't fit the name. "Good night, Jiwon," she said, not "Owner." She heard herself not say it, so did he. "Anja," he told the dog, and Hades sat and watched her car until the taillights turned. She came back the next night, and the night after, and a rhythm set into the thing, 11 at the gate. Feed the dog first, always. Because Jiwon was right that the animal wouldn't settle for either of them until she had. Then the room, the lamp, the boxes, her father's language spread out under her hands, and the port's language spread out beside it, and Jiwon across the table writing down every word. On the third night his phone rang, and his whole shape changed. She'd seen it once before, the night the two men called his name from the light. He stood, turned his back, spoke low and fast in Korean, and the easy man who'd told her she'd be paid for nothing was gone, replaced by something with edges. She kept her eyes on the manifest. When he hung up, he stood at the dark window a long moment before he came back to the table. Your world, she said, not a question. Or mine. They're the same world now. He sat. That's the part I didn't tell you when I asked you to sign. The people using your father's name aren't strangers to me. They're close. He picked the pen back up. Close enough that when you find the truck, I'm going to know the man who owns it. She set the manifest down. You already suspect someone. I suspect 3 someones. He met her eyes. And the contract says I can't tell you which, because the contract says I can't direct your findings. And Evelyn was right to make me sign it. If I tell you a name, you'll start reading toward it. I need you reading at the paper, not at my suspicions. He almost smiled again, tired. You're the only honest instrument I have. I'm not going to bend you before I use you. She held that. That might be, she said slowly, the strangest kind thing anyone said to me. It isn't kind. He opened the notebook. It's careful. Now read me the next one. She read him the next one, and the one after. Hades slept under the table with his weight divided exactly between them, and the pages went one at a time into the photographs, into Evelyn's safe, into the growing shape of something with a dead man's name on it and a living man's truck underneath. Near the end of that third night, she found a route sheet that stopped her cold, not because of what it said, but because of the letter at the end of the code. Not R, not her father's initial. Another letter, a driver she didn't know, running the same corridors under the same system, and beside it, faint, a second signature line initial she didn't recognize either. There's a second hand in this, she said quietly. Somebody who isn't just wearing my father's name, somebody who knows how to write it. She looked up, and the tired, careful man across the table went still. Jiwon, whoever's doing this didn't find my father's system in a drawer. They learned it from him. They worked with him. Hades lifted his head off both their feet at once. She turned the page. Bring me every manifest with that letter on it, she said, and she didn't look up, because she already knew that whatever was on the next page, she wasn't going to be able to hand it back. The manifests came in a shoebox with a rubber band gone soft with age. Ji-won set it on the table without a word and stepped back, giving her room, the way a man gives room to something he doesn't want to spook. Simone snapped the band off and it split in her fingers. She didn't notice. She was already reading. The second letter was there on the first page. Not R, a different initial, pressed into the signature line where a driver signed off on a load. She held it under the lamp and turned it so the light hit the ink at an angle. He signed over Raymond's numbers, she said. Same corridor, same yard, different hand. Hades lifted his head from under the table. Neither of them looked at him. Ji-won pulled the chair around and sat backward on it, forearms crossed over the top rail. How do you know it's a different hand? Because my father taught me his. She laid 2 pages side by side. Look at the tail on the R. Raymond dragged it. This one cut it short. Somebody who saw the signature enough to fake it, but not enough to breathe like him. She kept pulling pages. 10, 20. The box was deeper than it looked. Every third manifest carried the second letter, a V, badly closed at the bottom, the kind of V a man makes when he learned to write it fast and never slowed down again. She wrote it out on her own scrap paper to feel the shape of it. Her wrist did it wrong on the first try. On the second try, she understood why it looked forced. The writer was pausing, copying, not signing. He practiced this, she said. You practice a signature when it isn't yours. Ji-won's jaw moved once. Keep going. She kept going. By the third hour, her back had stopped complaining because it had stopped being a back and become a thing bent over a table. The notebook beside her filled up. He wrote what she told him to write, exactly. No additions, the pen in his tattooed hand moving slower than her mouth. She made him read it back twice. Evelyn's rule, every word in the vault. Container 4471, she said. Left the port April 11th, 10:40 at night. Manifest says it moved under 714R. Raymond's code. Raymond was 2 years in the ground on April 11th. She flattened the page. There's no truck. I keep looking for the truck. Carter had 9 trucks and every one of them got sold or scrapped when the company folded. I sat in the room when they auctioned the last 2. So what pulled container 4471 out of that port? He didn't answer. He wasn't supposed to. She'd told him on the second night to stop answering and start writing, because a man who fills in your blanks is a man steering you, and she wouldn't be steered. She matched the container number to a second sheet. A gate log. Time stamped by a machine, not a hand. And there it was. The port gate had a truck logged out at 10:40. It had a plate, it had a weight, it had a carrier license number in the far right column, and the license number belonged to Carter Transportation LLC. Still active, still valid, still renewed on time, every single year since her father died. The license never lapsed, she said. She said it quiet, but it landed in the room like something dropped. Somebody kept it alive. She pushed back from the table. Her chair scraped. You don't renew a dead company by accident. You file, you pay, you sign. Every year, on time, somebody walks the Carter license through the state so it never goes cold. Why keep a corpse breathing? Now Ji-won answered, because it wasn't a blank she'd left him, so the corpse can still sign for freight. She looked at him. A live license moves cargo, he said. A dead one gets flagged. Whoever's running these loads needs your father's company to be legally alive. On paper, renting the name. Renting his name. She tasted it. It tasted like the envelope from the surgical center, face down on her mother's table, the one she still hadn't opened. How much does a name like that move? Ji-won stood. He went to the far banker's box, the one he'd carried in himself and hadn't let her open yet, and he lifted the lid. Receipts. Hundreds of them. Fuel, port fees, way station tickets, all paid, all dated, all stamped with the Carter carrier number. This is 9 months, he said. 1 yard. Mine. This is what came with the property when I bought it, and I couldn't read a line of it. Now you can. She started counting and stopped counting because the counting didn't matter. The volume was the point. This wasn't one ghost truck sneaking a load. This was a business. A working, breathing business running under her dead father's license, and every mile of it, every ton, every dollar, had been signed off in a hand pretending to be Raymond's. They didn't just steal his name, she said. They put him back to work. Hades stood up. He'd felt the change in her voice. He crossed the small room and leaned his weight against her leg, and she put her hand flat on his skull without looking down, the way you hold onto a rail. How long have you known this? She asked. I knew there were seals. I knew there were trucks that shouldn't exist. Ji-won set the receipt down with a care that didn't match his size. I didn't know they were his until you said the name at the gate. Before that it was CT. 2 letters. It could have been anything. And after I said it, he held her eyes. After you said it, it stopped being a business problem. She didn't ask what it became. She wasn't ready to hear the answer inside her own head, so she went back to the paper, because paper didn't look at you like that. She sorted for 2 more hours. She built a stack by month, then a stack by container, then a stack by the second letter, the V, and the V stack was thick. Whoever he was steady. He didn't miss a load. He wrote his forced V2 3 times a week for years, and every time he did it, he was reaching into a dead man's pocket and taking a mile. At the bottom of the second box, she found something that wasn't a manifest. It was a renewal filing. A photocopy of the state form that kept Carter Transportation legally alive. It was dated 14 months ago. The signature line said Raymond Carter in the forced hand, the cut short R, the practiced letters. But down in the corner, where the filer notes a contact number for the agency, someone had written a phone number in a different pen. Blue. Newer. Simone stared at the number. She didn't recognize it, but it was a number a living person had written, on a form, connected to her father's corpse of a company, and it was the first thing in the box that could ring. G1. She held it up. This is a phone. He came around the table fast. He read it once and his face did the thing she'd learned to watch for. It went smooth. Too smooth. The smoothness was where he kept the dangerous part. You know it, she said. No, he said it too quickly, and then he corrected himself because he'd promised her, on the second night, that he would not lie to the only honest instrument he had. The area code. I've seen it. On a card in a drawer that isn't mine. Whose drawer? The phone in his pocket buzzed. He didn't reach for it. It buzzed again. On the third buzz, he took it out, looked at the screen, and turned it face down on the table without answering. And the turning down of that phone was the loudest thing that had happened all night. That's the second time tonight, Simone said. Same person? Family. The word came out of him like a stone he'd been carrying under his tongue. It's family. She set the renewal form down between them, slowly, so he'd watch her do it. You told me 3 people, she said. The first night you told me you suspected 3 people and you couldn't give me names because the contract says you can't steer me. I read 3 hands in this box. Raymond's, the fake Raymond, and yours, because half these receipts have your yard stamp on them, and you didn't know what you were paying for. She tapped the blue number. That's a 4th, a living one. So which of your 3 is it? The contract. Screw the contract. She stood. Hades shifted to stay against her. The contract keeps you from putting a name in my head, so I read the paper clean. Fine. I read it clean. I read 9 months of your yard and 2 years of ghost loads and a license somebody's been feeding like a pet. And now I'm the one saying it. There's a person on the end of this number who has been signing my father's name to move freight for years, and you know the area code, and your family won't stop calling, and I am not stupid, Jiwon. He was quiet. Look at me and tell me you don't already have a name, she said. He looked at her. He didn't give her the name, but he didn't say no, and the not saying was a yes, with the edges filed off, and she felt the floor of the thing she'd been standing on tilt. They're using him against you, she said, slower now, working it out with her mouth while her mind ran ahead. This isn't just a scam to move cargo. If it were only money, you'd have handed the box to a lawyer 9 months ago and let the state chase it. You didn't. You paid me to read it so no one else would see it first. Which means whatever's in here doesn't just burn the man who signed it. She stopped. It burns you too. His silence stretched. How does my father's forged signature burn the white serpent? She asked. And there it was. She'd said it. The name the city whispered. She'd used it once before, at the container, as a wall to put between them. This time she used it as a scalpel, and she watched it go in. Because whoever set this up, he said, finally, each word measured, wanted it found. Someday, by the wrong people. They built a business that runs on a dead American trucker's license and routes cargo through a yard owned by me. If the wrong agency opens this box before I do, it doesn't read as one cousin's side hustle. It reads as the serpent laundering freight through a stolen company and hiding it behind a grieving family. He touched the edge of the renewal form. Your name is the wall they built to hide behind, and mine is the door. She sat back down because her legs told her to. So I'm not the auditor, she said. I'm the alibi they picked for you, except I found out. You were never supposed to find out. You were supposed to stay a woman feeding a dog. Something moved across his face that she hadn't seen on it before, and it wasn't smooth, and it wasn't dangerous. I didn't count on you learning the commands. I didn't count on you reading the codes in one night. I built the contract to be fair because I thought fair would be enough to keep a stranger working. I didn't think you'd care. About what? About him. He nodded at the box. About the name. She put her hand on the renewal form. Raymond Carter, in a hand that wasn't his. She thought about the kitchen table, her father dragging her small fist through the tail of the R, telling her a signature is a promise you leave behind so people know you stood behind your work. Somebody had taken his promise and rented it out by the mile. They didn't kill the company, she said. The company dying would have let him rest. They kept it alive so they could keep making him sign. Hades made a sound low in his chest, not a growl, something older. I need 3 things, Simone said, and her voice had changed, and she heard it change, and she let it. I need every renewal filing you have, going back to the year he died. I need to know which of these receipts touched your yard before you owned it, and which touched it after, because that line is the day this stopped being someone else's crime and started being yours. And I need you to tell me one thing, and you can tell me without breaking your contract, because it's not a name. Ask. The 3 people you suspect. She held up one finger. Are any of them American? He went still. Because the man who forged this, she said, learned my father's system. Not just the signature, the system. First digit is the yard, middle pair is the corridor, last letter is the driver. That's not something you steal off a license. That's something you learn sitting in the cab, riding along, working the routes. My father let exactly a few people that close, and most of them are dead or gone, and one of them, she stopped. The V on the paper looked back at her. Forced. Practiced. A man who wrote it fast for years and never slowed down. One of them what? G1 said. One of them signed with a V. She didn't have the name. She had the shape of him now, the outline where a person would go, and she knew, the way she'd known the dog was starving beside food he couldn't touch, that the outline was already someone she'd shaken hands with, once, a long time ago, at a funeral, wearing a navy suit and 2 identical pens in his breast pocket. She didn't say it out loud, she wasn't sure, and Evelyn's voice was in her ear. Don't name what you can't prove, or you hand them the reason to call you a liar. I need the funeral list, she said instead. My father's. Who came? My mother kept the guest book. It's in a box at her apartment. She stood again. The system learner was close enough to be at that funeral. I want to match the room to the hand. G1 stood with her. It's 3 in the morning. I'm not going now. She started gathering the V-stack, squaring the edges, and he watched her do it and didn't stop her. I'm going to sleep 4 hours and cook a lunch shift and come back tomorrow night with my mother's guest book, and we're going to sit here and cross every V against every name in that room until one of them fits. She looked up. Unless you'd rather give me the name yourself and save us both the week. I can't? Won't? Can't. He said it hard. If I give you the name and you read the box looking for him, you'll find him whether he's there or not. Everyone finds what they're sent to find. That's why I built the contract. That's why it has to be you and not me. He put his hand flat on the table, near hers, not touching. I need to be able to stand in front of a room someday and say the woman who found this had no idea who I wanted her to find. That's the only version of this that saves your family and doesn't just save me. She understood him then, more than she wanted to. You're building a defense, she said. I'm building the truth. The defense is a side effect. For a mafia boss, you say the word truth a lot. For a line cook, you read a port manifest like a priest reads scripture. He almost smiled. He didn't finish it. Go home, Simone. The gate's open till you leave. She packed the copies Evelyn required. Every page she'd touched tonight, photographed on her phone before it left the room. The originals staying, the images going to a vault a lawyer held, and a serpent couldn't reach. She did it in front of him so he'd see her do it, and he let her, and that letting was its own kind of answer. At the door she stopped. The phone number, she said. The blue one. Don't call it. I wasn't going to. Yes, you were. She'd seen his thumb move toward it. You know the area code and you want to hear the voice and be sure. Don't. If it's who you think, and he hears your number, he knows you're close, and then the box in this room becomes a fire, and there's nothing left to read. She held up her phone. It's already copied. It's already safe. Let him think you're still blind. He looked at her for a long moment, and something in him settled, the way the dog had settled the first night, when she stayed on her knees and didn't run. You'd have made a good consigliere, he said. I make a good cook. She pushed the door. Feed him the broth. Little meat. I'll be back at 11. She drove the 19 minutes with the radio off, the way he drove, and she noticed she was doing it and didn't turn it on. Her mother's building had the burned stair light still out. Simone climbed in the dark by feel. Inside, Gloria was in the chair again, not the bed, a magazine open on her chest, breathing slow. The pill organizer sat on the side table. Simone checked it without meaning to, a reflex now, and the night dose was gone, taken, and she stood there in the dark, holding that small mercy longer than it deserved. Then she went to the closet in the hall, the one with her father's things. and she found the box, and inside the box the guest book, cream cover gone gray at the edges, and she carried it to the kitchen table and opened it under the same lamp her mother read by. Names. Her father's whole life in fountain pen and ballpoint, drivers and neighbors and a pastor and a cousin from Detroit. She ran her finger down the list, and her finger stopped on its own before her eyes caught up. A signature near the bottom of the second page. A first name, a last name, and beside it, out of habit, the man had signed the way he signed everything. The V was closed wrong at the bottom, cut short, practiced. She sat very still. She didn't write it down. She didn't photograph it. She looked at the name a long time, the way you look at a face you'd decided to forget, and she thought about a navy suit and 2 pens and a hand on her shoulder at the graveside saying, "If you ever need anything, your father was my partner," and she had been 22 and numb and had believed him. Down the hall, her mother turned in the chair and murmured something without waking. Simone closed the guest book. She put her hand on the cover and left it there. "I know your hand now," she said to the empty kitchen, to the name, to the man who had rented her father by the mile. "I know your hand." She didn't call G1. She didn't call Evelyn. It was almost 4 in the morning, and there was nothing to do with a certainty that wasn't yet proof except carry it. So she carried it to the couch and lay down in her clothes, and stared at the ceiling, and did not sleep. And somewhere across the city, a dog she'd taught to trust her was lying against a boss who had just learned that the honest instrument he'd hired could cut both ways, and neither of them knew yet that the fourth hand had already signed his last name in a dead man's guest book, waiting 3 years for someone to read it. She turned the name over once more in the dark and let it settle, and it settled like a seal locking home. Victor. The envelope came before the coffee did. Simone found it wedged under the apartment door when she got up off the sofa, a business envelope with no stamp, hand-delivered while she slept 4 feet away. Her name on the front in block letters, not Gloria's, hers. She didn't open it standing. She sat at the kitchen table, where the guest book from the funeral still lay closed under last night's certainty, and she slit the flap with her thumbnail. 2 pages. A notice of trustee's sale. The house, the one Gloria had paid on for 29 years, the one with the burnt stairwell light and the second-floor windows, was scheduled for auction on the courthouse steps in 10 days. There was a case number. There was a figure. There was a line that named the creditor of record on the underlying obligation, and the line did not say the bank. It said an acquisitions entity, LLC, a string of initials that meant nothing to her yet. She read it twice, the way she read everything now. Then she folded it along its own crease and slid it into the inside pocket of her bag, the one with the zipper, next to the receipt with the Korean words. She checked the bedroom. Gloria was still asleep, one hand open on the blanket. Simone closed the door without a sound. Her phone buzzed on the table. "Evelyn, you're up early," Simone said. "So are you. I got something at 6 this morning I need you to sit down for." "I'm sitting." Carter Transportation. The LLC's still an active entity. You knew that. What you didn't know is there's a member vote scheduled, 11 days out, a board action to formally transfer the operating license to a new managing entity. Evelyn's pen clicked once on her end. Somebody wants the license moved into clean hands before an audit can name it dirty. 11 days, Simone. They're racing you. Simone looked at the wall above the stove where Gloria kept a photo of Raymond in a light blue shirt, sleeves folded, the watch on his wrist. 10 days on the house, she said. 11 on the license. Silence on the line. Say that again. There's a notice under my door this morning. Trustee's sale. 10 days. She heard her own voice go flat, the way it did at the restaurant when Dwight talked. The creditor of record isn't the bank anymore. It's an LLC, some acquisitions entity. Read me the name. She read it. Evelyn was quiet for a length of time that told Simone everything before the words did. "I'll run the entity," Evelyn said finally. "Don't do anything today. Don't sign anything. Don't tell G1 yet." "Why not?" "Because I need to know who owns that LLC before you walk into that warehouse tonight. Promise me." Simone promised. She hung up. She made the coffee she'd forgotten to want. Then she went to work and stood the morning line at the Bell and Time prep station, breaking down chickens, and when Dwight passed through at 11 and said the walk-in smelled and it was on her, she said, "Yes, chef," and did not look up. There was a time that would have been the worst thing that happened to her in a week. It didn't even make the list now. She worked the nightline too. She closed alone, the way she had for a year. She counted the tips, $51, and she noticed the number the way you notice a stranger's face on a bus, without feeling. $51 against 10 days. She drove to the warehouse. The gate was open, the way he'd left it open every night since. Hades came out of the dark before she was through it, low and fast, and pressed his skull into her hip hard enough to move her. She held still and let him. Then she crouched and put both hands flat on his ribs, which had filled out now, and she stayed down there in the cold longer than the dog needed, because the ground was a simple thing, and she wanted a simple thing. Jiwon was in the records room. She heard him before she saw him. A phone call, low, in Korean, the dangerous register. It stopped the second her boots scuffed the concrete. He came to the doorway. He read her face the way she read documents. What happened? She almost told him. The notice was in her bag. The word Victor was in her mouth from last night, unspent. Evelyn's voice was in her ear. Don't tell him yet. Not until I know who owns the LLC. She swallowed all three. Long shift, she said. He held the doorway a moment. He didn't believe her, but the contract said he couldn't push, and he'd built the whole thing so he couldn't. So he stepped aside and let her into the room where the boxes were. She worked. She pulled the shoebox of manifests with the forged V and set them beside the port gate logs, and she matched containers to nights the way she'd been doing, and she said each match out loud so he could write it in the open notebook, because that was Evelyn's rule, and she clung to Evelyn's rules now like a rail on a stair. Container out, no Carter truck, license number present, time stamped. Say it, watch him write it. Around 1 in the morning, her phone lit on the table. Evelyn. Simone stepped into the corridor to take it, out of his hearing, and she felt Jiwon's eyes follow her the whole way and stay on the door after it closed. I ran the LLC, Evelyn said. No hello. The acquisitions entity that holds your mother's debt. It's a shell. 3 layers. I got through 2 of them tonight because a friend at the county owed me a favor and stayed late. And the managing member of the parent entity. Evelyn stopped. Simone heard papers move. Simone, the parent entity is registered to an address I've seen before. It's the mailing address on the warehouse purchase. His warehouse. 8 months ago. The corridor was concrete and cold, and Simone put her free hand on the wall to have something under it. Say it plain, she said. Kang Ji-won owns the debt on your mother's house. Evelyn's voice was careful, level, a lawyer laying a body on a table. He acquired it. 8 months ago. Around the same time he bought the yard with your father's seals in it. He's held the paper on your family this whole time, since before he ever saw you kneel at that gate. Simone did not say anything. The dog on the other side of the door whined once, low, feeling it through the walls the way he felt everything. There could be an explanation, Evelyn said, and even she sounded like she didn't believe there was one that mattered. But you asked me for the name, and that's the name. He knew. Whatever else is true, he knew, and he sat across a table from you every night and let you read your own father's forged signature, and never said the debt on your mother's roof was in his drawer. 10 days, Simone said. He owns the 10 days. He owns the 10 days. She hung up. She stood in the corridor and did the thing she had not let herself do in front of Dwight, in front of Gloria, in front of any of them for 3 years, which was nothing. She stood and did nothing and let it go all the way through her. Then she straightened her spine, because the spine was the only thing she'd never let them take, and she went back into the room. Jiwon had stopped writing. He was watching her hand, the one that had been on the wall. Sit down, she said. He didn't sit. Men like him didn't take the order. She watched him decide to, watched him pull the chair and lower himself into it, and it cost him something, and she was glad it cost him something. The debt on my mother's house, she said. Who holds it? For 1 second, his face did the thing the dog did at the gate the first night. It froze, and in the freezing she had her answer before he opened his mouth, the way she'd had the answer about Victor before Evelyn confirmed it, because she had learned this month to read the pause instead of the word. Simone. Who holds it? An entity I control. He said it evenly. He didn't reach for her. He didn't stand. He gave her the truth flat on the table because he'd built a whole contract on the principle that he couldn't lie to her, and now the principle had teeth in his own throat. I acquired the note 8 months ago when I bought the yard. The seals came with the property, and I traced the name Carter to a debt in default, and I bought the debt to control it. To control it. To keep anyone else from using it against your family before I understood what the seals were. His jaw worked. It was leverage I bought before I knew you existed. I never used it. You never told me. Her voice didn't rise. That was the thing she'd learned from her father. The thing that made men look up. I have knelt on your concrete. I have read my dead father's forged name off your paper for 3 weeks and told you every line of it out loud so your pen could keep up. And the roof my sick mother sleeps under has been in your pocket the entire time, and you watched me count $51 in tips against a surgery I can't buy, and you said nothing. The contract pays you weekly. I made sure. Don't. One word. And it landed harder than a shout, and she watched it land. Don't tell me about the contract. I understand the contract now. It's a beautiful contract. Evelyn couldn't find a single trap in it. Do you know why there's no trap in the contract, Jiwon? She leaned on the table with both hands, the way he'd leaned into every room she'd ever seen him enter. Because the trap was already sprung 8 months ago. You didn't need a clause. You had the house. He stood then. Not toward her. Away, 1 step, to the wall, and he put his back to the concrete and looked at her across the boxes of her father's stolen name. Hades rose from under the table and stood between them, ears up, weight even, looking from one to the other, and for once the dog's fairness felt like an accusation aimed at both of them. I was going to forgive it, Jiswan said. When? When it was over. When the audit was clean and the name was cleared and you were safe. I was going to tear the note up and hand you the pieces. That was the plan. The plan. She almost laughed, and it came out wrong, and she pressed her lips over it. You had a plan to give me my mother's house back like a gift, like a ring, like a container of chicken through a gate, and I was supposed to what? Be grateful? Kneel again? A different gate? No. That's what this is. She straightened. That's what it's always been. You feed the thing that's starving until it comes to your hand, and then you own the fact that it came. You did it to the dog. The last owner chained him next to food he couldn't reach until the only kindness in his world came from one set of hands, and then that dog was yours forever, and you call it loyalty. She looked at Hades between them. You bought me the way somebody bought him. You just did it slower, and you called it a contract, and you let me keep my apron. That reached him. She saw it go in. His hand, the tattooed one, closed on nothing at his side. I have never once made you kneel, he said, and his voice was rough now, the even gone out of it. You knelt for the dog, not for me. You came through that gate on your own, the first night and every night after. I left it open, that's all I did. I left the gate open. You left the gate open, Simone said, with my mother's house on the other side of it, and you didn't tell me it was there. She picked up her bag. That's not an open gate. That's a snare with the wire painted to look like grass. She took the notice out of the zipper pocket and she put it on the table between them, on top of the open notebook, over the lines in his own handwriting. The trustee's sale, 10 days, the LLC that was his. I quit, she said. Simone. I quit the contract, effective now. Every clause let me walk with no penalty. You built that in, so I'll use it. Evelyn keeps every copy in the vault, and every copy is a photograph. And if a single one of them helps the men who forged my father's name, she'll know it was you who moved it. The evidence stays, the consultant leaves. Keep the money. He came off the wall. Take the note. Right now. I'll sign it over on the hood of your car in the next 4 minutes. The whole balance, forgiven, in writing, witnessed by your own lawyer. The house is yours tonight. Free. Take it. And there it was, the thing she'd been waiting for without knowing she was waiting. The moment the leverage turned itself over and showed its belly and called itself a gift. She looked at the offer. She let herself want it for exactly as long as it took to think of Gloria's hand open on the blanket. 10 days, $11,000, a roof, all of it, gone, if she reached across the table. No, she said. Simone. No. She put the strap of the bag on her shoulder. You don't understand what you just did, so let me be plain, because you like plain. You just proved it. You offered to unruin me in 4 minutes with a pen, which means you could have unruined me 8 months ago, or 3 weeks ago, or last night, and you chose the moment that bought you the most. You didn't offer me the house until I was walking out the door with it as a weapon, so the house isn't a gift, it's a leash you're holding out because the dog turned around. That is not. Trust is a tool you people use. She said it quietly, and it filled the whole concrete room. That's what I've learned in this yard. Not from my father, from you. Trust is the thing you build in somebody, so that when you close your hand, they've already decided not to run. You gave me a contract with no traps, so I'd trust the contract. You left the gate open, so I'd trust the gate. You were going to forgive the debt, so I'd trust the man. Every kindness in this place is a wire, and I am done being the animal that learns which hand the food comes from. Jiwon stood very still. The dog leaned against his leg and then, deliberately, crossed the 2 feet of concrete and leaned against hers, and then stood in the middle again, torn, and the sight of it, the one honest creature in the yard not knowing whose grief was worse, was the only thing that nearly broke her. If you take the money, he said, low, your mother sleeps in her bed. If you don't, she loses the house in 10 days. You understand that I am telling you the truth about that. I am not threatening you. I'm telling you the arithmetic. Walk out, and the arithmetic doesn't change because you're angry at me. I know the arithmetic. Her eyes were dry, and she hated that they were dry, hated that she'd run out of the other thing years ago. I've done nothing but arithmetic since I was 22. $43. 11,000. 10 days. I can do it in my sleep on your concrete floor. She took a breath. But if I take your pen tonight, then everything I read in these boxes is bought. Every line I say in front of that board in 11 days, somebody's lawyer stands up and says she was on the payroll of the man who owned her mother's mortgage. And she'd say anything. And they'd be right. Because I would have taken your money the night I found out you had it. You'd save my mother's roof and cost me the only thing that clears my father's name. And you know that. You've known it since you built the contract. That's why the contract exists. He didn't answer. Because it was true. And he'd never once been able to lie to her. And he'd made sure of that himself. You're the only honest instrument I have, she said, giving him his own words back, and she watched them go in like a seal locking home. That's what you told me. Well, an instrument that's been bought isn't honest anymore, so I can't be yours. Not the consultant, not anything. She turned for the door. Hades moved to follow her, and she said, low, in the fumbling Korean she'd copied phonetically off a receipt weeks ago, the word for stay. The dog stopped. He'd learned her voice. Even now he obeyed her voice, and that was the cruelest thing in the room, that she could make the animal stay with a word she'd stolen from the men who chained him. And she understood in that second exactly how Jiwon had done it to her, because she had just done it to the dog. Simone. His voice followed her to the door. Victor Shaw. She stopped. She didn't turn. You found the second signature. You've known the name since last night. I watched you carry it in here tonight like a stone in your shoe. Victor Shaw. My cousin's man. He's one of the 3 I couldn't tell you. I still can't tell you. Under the contract you just quit, which means I'm not telling you as your client. I'm telling you as the man who owns your mother's house and has nothing left to lose by being honest, because you've already decided I'm a liar. A breath. Be careful of him. He knows you're reading. If he learns your name is Carter and you're in these boxes, you become the loose end, and he's spent 3 years learning how to make a Carter disappear on paper. 10 days from now, he needs that license moved, and you're the only person alive who can read it back to him. That makes you a problem to him. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? She stood in the doorway with the cold coming in off the yard. She had come here to walk out clean, and now he'd put a name in her hands. The name, freely, with no clause to hold it. The one thing his money couldn't make a lie, and she hated that it landed as true, because it was the first thing he'd given her all night that couldn't buy him anything back. I understand, she said. I understood it before you said it. Then let me put men on your mother's building. No, Simone. You don't get to guard the house you're taking. She looked back at him once, over her shoulder, and the tattoo caught the work light and she didn't look away from it this time. That's the whole trick, isn't it? Break the roof and offer the umbrella. I'd rather stand in the rain than owe you the dry. She walked out. The gate was open. It was always open now, and she saw it for what it was, and she went through it anyway because her car was on the other side, and she had a mother to drive home to. Behind her, the dog did not follow. She'd told him to stay, and he stayed, and she got in her car and put both hands on the wheel, and sat there a full minute before she could make them turn the key. She drove the 19 minutes with the radio off. She'd started doing that to be like him, weeks ago, and now she couldn't remember how to want the noise back. Gloria was awake when she came in, sitting up in the chair, lamp on, the pill organizer open on the side table and the surgical center envelope, still sealed, still face down, 3 years of her daughter turning it over, in her lap. You've been coming home at 2 in the morning for a month, Gloria said. Her voice was soft and it wasn't a question. Smelling like a dog. With money in the account I didn't earn and you didn't make at that restaurant. I raised you. You think I can't read you the way you read those papers you won't tell me about? Simone stood in the doorway with her keys in her hand. Sit down, baby, Gloria said. And this time, you're going to tell me the number. The real one. All of it. She turned the envelope over in her lap, and for the first time in 3 years, the daughter watched the mother's thumb slide under the flap. I'm tired of us both pretending we don't know what's on the other side of the paper. Simone looked at her mother opening the envelope she herself had never been able to open. She thought of the notice folded in her bag, the 10 days, the 11,000, the license, the name Victor Shaw sitting in her chest like a swallowed seal. She thought of the man in the yard holding out a pen that could fix all of it, and cost her all of it. She crossed the room and knelt, one more time, the last time she'd let it mean surrender, beside her mother's chair, and she put her hand over Gloria's hand on the envelope, and she stopped it. Don't open it tonight, Simone said. Not because of the number, because after tonight, the number changes. Give me till morning, and I'll tell you everything. And the everything is worse than the number, and better than the number. Both. But I need you to hear all of it awake, in daylight, with your pill taken. Not at 2 in the morning from a girl who just walked out on the only thing that could have saved this roof. Gloria's warm eyes moved over her daughter's face the way they had when Simone was small and lying about a broken cup. You walked out on something. Yes. Was it the right thing to walk out on? Simone thought about it. She thought about the gate that was always open, and the wire painted like grass, and the dog she'd told to stay with a stolen word. I don't know yet, she said. Ask me in 10 days. She helped her mother to bed. She took the sealed envelope out of Gloria's hands and set it back on the side table, face down, the way it had lived for 3 years, and she turned off the lamp. Then she lay on the sofa that had been her bed for 8 months and she did not sleep, and somewhere across the city a dog she'd told to stay was still standing in the middle of a concrete floor between the man who owned him and the door a woman had walked out of, and the notice in her bag counted down its 10 days in the dark, and 11 days behind it a board waited to vote her father's name into clean hands, and she had nothing now. No contract, no money, no client, no dry place to stand, nothing but a spine and a name. Victor Shaw. She turned it over once in the dark and let it settle, and it settled like a countdown starting. Gloria was awake before the coffee finished, sitting up straight in the good chair, with the pill organizer already open in her lap. She had taken the morning dose. Simone saw the empty Monday slot and understood that her mother had decided to be strong for this. Sit down, Gloria said. Tell me the real number. Simone knelt on the rug the way she had knelt on the asphalt for the dog, both knees, nothing between her and the floor. She did not reach for softer words. 11,000 for the surgery, and there's a debt on this house Daddy left. Somebody bought it. The auction is in 10 days. Her mother's hand went flat against her own chest, over the valve that was failing. 10 days. I'm not letting them take it. With what, Simone? Not cruel. Just arithmetic. I don't have that answer yet. She held her mother's eyes. But I have the truth, and the truth is worth more than the money to the man who's counting on nobody having it. Gloria studied her daughter's face for a long moment, the way she used to grade a room full of children she already knew were lying. Then she reached out and tucked a wave of hair behind Simone's ear. Your father used to sit exactly like that when he'd broken something and hadn't decided whether to tell me. I didn't break this. No. Gloria's thumb pressed the ring on Simone's finger, the antique one, his. Somebody broke it and wrote his name on the pieces. You should have told me, Gloria said. Not an accusation, a wound she was showing on purpose. You'd have skipped more pills to save it. Her mother didn't argue, because it was true, and they both let the truth sit there instead of dressing it up. Gloria's fingers found the medical bracelet on her own wrist and turned it once around, a small habit Simone had watched her whole life. 3 years, I thought that envelope was a bill I couldn't pay, Gloria said. It was a bill somebody else was running up in your father's name. Yes. And you're the one who read it. I'm the only one left who could. Gloria's mouth pressed thin. Then read it all the way to the end, baby. Don't you stop in the middle because it got hard. Your father never finished a run in his life and I buried him proud. Her voice cracked once and held. You finish this one. They stayed like that until the coffee stopped dripping. It was the first time in 3 years the number had been said out loud in the apartment, and the ceiling did not fall in. That surprised both of them. Evelyn called at 9. Simone stepped into the stairwell to take it, past the burnt bulb. The board vote moved, Evelyn said. Somebody pushed it up. 11 days became 5. They're transferring the operating license Thursday. 5 days. 5 to their vote. 9 to your mother's house. Paper shuffled on Evelyn's end. They're not consolidating cleanly, Simone. They're panicking. Panic leaves prints. Then I need to be in that room. You're a line cook who quit a consulting contract. You have no standing to walk into a Carter Transportation member vote. I'm the estate of R. Carter. Simone heard her own voice go level. It's my father's name on the license. Find me the standing. A pause. Then something Simone had not heard from Evelyn before. A small, hard breath that was almost a laugh. I've been waiting 8 days for you to say that. Give me till tonight. The phone in Simone's back pocket buzzed while she was still on the stairs. A number she didn't know. She let it go. It buzzed again. On the third try, she answered without speaking. Miss Carter. A man's voice. Warm, practiced. The kind that had spent 30 years making people feel chosen. You don't know me, but I knew your father better than anyone alive. She knew the voice. She had heard it once, over a casket, saying, Your father was my partner. Navy suit. 2 identical pens. Victor Shaw, she said. The warmth flickered, just for a beat, then came back stronger. So you have been reading. Good. Then you know it's complicated. Your father and I built something, and when he passed, somebody had to keep it breathing. I did that. For the family. For you. You forged his signature onto Ghost Freight for 3 years. I preserved his license. A father's patience in it now, a mentor's disappointment. Do you have any idea what a dead man's operating authority is worth to the right people? I kept the lights on, and I'd like to keep them on for you. A shift in tone, softer, the offer sliding in under the door. 25,000, Simone. Today, the house, the surgery, and a little left over. All you do is stop reading, walk away. Let Thursday happen. 25,000. More than double what she needed. The valve, the house, her mother's shoulders unbending. Why me? She said. Why not just let the vote pass? Because you're the last person on earth who can read a Carter route sheet. He said it like a compliment, and that was his mistake. The vanity of a man who had gotten away with it so long he'd forgotten to be afraid. You want to know how good I am? Your father's system. I run it in my sleep. Yard, corridor, driver. I put the 7 up front because that was always his home yard. Kept the 14 because that corridor never got inspected. And I signed the R because a dead driver never fails a log check. 714R. Clean as a whistle. Nobody else on this earth could have built that. Simone stopped breathing. He had just said it. The whole grammar of the forgery. The choice to keep the 7. The reason for the 14. The R that never failed a check. Not deduced. Authored. A man explaining his own handwriting because he could not resist being admired for it. In her free hand, she was already holding her phone flat, and the screen had been recording since the second buzz, because Evelyn had made her set it up that way 8 days ago, and Simone had never turned it off. 25,000, she repeated, keeping her voice small, keeping him talking. In cash. Cash, no trail, a gift from an old friend of the family. And if I say no, the warmth left the line entirely. Then a grieving girl gets buried under her father's paper along with him. Your mother loses the house and her name in the same week. I've made men disappear on ink, Simone. You're a spreadsheet I haven't finished. Okay, Simone said. Let me think. You have until Thursday. One thing, she said, before he could go. Why keep the 14? If you were building it to hide, why not pick a fresh corridor? She heard the vanity flex again, could almost see him tapping one of his 2 pens against the desk. Because your father worked 14 for 11 years and every inspector on that corridor knew the Carter name and waved it through. A dead man's reputation clears the road better than a bribe. I didn't hide behind the name, Simone. I drove behind it. A pause. He'd have understood. Business is business. He'd have hit you, she said. Victor laughed, and the laugh was the last mistake, because it was recorded too. Maybe. But he's not here to. That's rather the point. Thursday, she said. She hung up. Her hand was shaking so hard she nearly dropped the phone. She did not call Ji-won. She called Evelyn, and she played the recording into the vault, time-stamped, and then she sat on the cold stair and pressed her forehead to her knees and let herself shake for exactly 1 minute. Then she stood up. She went to the yard that night because the dog was still hers to feed, and because there was one thing left she needed to see with her own eyes. Ji-won was at the gate before she reached it. He had a way of arriving without sound that had stopped frightening her weeks ago. Tonight it did something else. It steadied her. Victor called me, she said. His jaw moved once. What did he offer? 25,000 to stop reading. She let it land. I recorded him explaining the code, 714R, in his own mouth, bragging. He built it. He said it like a signature. Ji-won closed his eyes for a moment, and when he opened them, there was something in his face she had not seen. Not triumph. Grief, almost. He works for my cousin. Say the name. Kang Min-suk. He said it flat, the way you set down something heavy. My father's brother's son. Chief financial officer of everything my family owns. The one who's been calling. The family I couldn't name. He looked at the warehouse behind him. He acquired your father's debt through 3 shells, so it would trace to me and not to him. He put Victor on the license. He built the Ghost Fleet under Carter authority, so if it ever cracked open, it would read as the White Serpent laundering freight behind a dead black trucker and his widow. I was always the wall he was going to hide behind. You were always the alibi. He just didn't know the alibi could read. Simone had guessed most of it. Hearing it named still took the floor out from under her for a second. And the dog. Ji-won went still. You said the previous owner chained him here and walked away. You bought the yard with Hades already on the chain. She stepped closer to the fence. Hades pressed his skull against the wire between them. Who was the previous owner, Ji-won? A shell. His voice had gone quiet. I never met him. Papers only. Find out tonight. He already had the answer. She could see it forming behind his eyes as the pieces she'd handed him snapped into a shape he'd been refusing to look at. Min-suk bought this yard 8 months before I did, held it under a name, sold it to me clean. His hand closed on the fence. He put the dog here, he put the seals here. He knew I'd buy anything with a strong dog and cheap steel. He built the whole trap and left it baited. Who fed the dog before me? Who trained him? Who chained him and let him starve down to his ribs so he'd bond to one hand and guard one box? The name came out of Ji-won like it cost him. Marcus Reed. The trainer. He handles our dogs. Handled. Ji-won's knuckles were white on the wire. Min-seok paid him. To plant Hades, to disable the yard cameras the nights the ghost containers moved, and to keep his mouth shut. Marcus has old video of me from years ago, things I did before I ran this the way I run it now. Min-suk holds those tapes over him. That's the leash on Marcus. That's how the whole thing stayed dark. He looked down at the dog. They starved him on purpose, so he'd guard the one box that could hang me. And instead he sat for me, Simone said. Hades looked up at both of them, tail moving slow against the asphalt, the old scar pale on his muzzle. The thing built to be a weapon had chosen to be a witness. He starved him down to bond him to one hand, Simone said. Her throat worked, and the hand it picked was mine, because I was the one who came at 11 o'clock with food that wouldn't make a wrecked stomach worse. Marcus built a guard dog, He didn't count on a hungry man's daughter walking the same lot every night to save $11. She crouched and put her palm flat on the wire, and Hades leaned his full weight into it. They spent 3 years and I don't know how much money to teach this dog to guard the one box that could hang you. And a plate of plain chicken undid the whole thing. That's the part Minsuk can't file a motion against, Jiwon said quietly. He can buy a trainer, he can buy tapes, he can buy a board, he couldn't buy the thing that made the dog sit. There's one more thing, Jiwon said. He reached into his jacket and took out a single folded page and held it through the gap in the fence. Not toward the vault, toward her. Before you decide what I am, this is the note on your mother's house. I bought it 8 months ago as leverage. I never used it. He set it in her hand. It was signed at the bottom and dated tonight, and above his signature 3 words. Paid in full. I'm not offering it to buy your silence, he said. You already have the recording. You don't need me. I'm giving up the only power I ever held over your family, and I'm doing it whether you walk into that room with me Thursday or against me. The debt is dead. The house is your mother's. That's not a trade. That's me putting down the thing I should never have picked up. Simone looked at the paper. 8 days ago, the same offer had felt like a hook. Tonight, it felt like a man taking off a glove he'd been ashamed of. The difference wasn't the paper. The difference was that this time he expected nothing back and had said so and had signed it before she could refuse. You could have burned it and never told me it existed, she said. You'd have found it in the vault by Friday. A ghost of a smile. Evelyn misses nothing. She folded the page and put it in the zippered pocket of her bag, next to the receipt with the Korean words on it. Thursday, she said, I walk in with Evelyn. You freeze nothing until I'm standing. When Minsuk reaches for the vote, you open your books. All of them. Every account he touched. That will end me in that family. Then it ends you. She held his eyes. Transparent or nothing. Jiwon looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded once, and it was the nod of a man agreeing to be seen. Transparent. The boardroom was on the 40th floor, glass on 3 sides, a table long enough to seat men who had never met the people whose names they moved around. Simone came in at 9 on Thursday in her father's ring, and a sapphire top, hair down, Evelyn beside her in cobalt with a case in each hand. Behind them walked 3 men in work jackets. 3 freight carriers Carter Transportation had quietly ruined over 3 years. Men whose real routes had been swallowed by ghost trucks running under a dead man's license. Evelyn had found them in 9 days. Minsuk stood at the head of the table in a beige suit, cufflinks catching the light, center part precise. He did not have a neck tattoo. He had something worse, the calm of a man who had never once been caught. His eyes went to Simone and did the arithmetic and came up short. This is a closed member vote, he said. The cook has no standing. The estate of R. Carter has standing, Evelyn said, and set a certified filing on the table. Simone Carter is the sole heir. You've been operating her father's license for 3 years. She's here to exercise it. Victor Shaw was in the 3rd chair, navy suit, 2 pens in his pocket. When he saw Simone, his face did the warm thing, and then it stopped doing it, because Evelyn had opened the first case. Before the vote, Simone said, and her voice carried across the glass without rising. You should hear something. She played the recording. I put the 7 up front because that was always his home yard, kept the 14 because that corridor never got inspected, and I signed the R because a dead driver never fails a log check. Victor came halfway out of his chair. That's out of context. It's your voice, Simone said, explaining how you forged my father's name. There's no context that fixes it. Minsuk did not move a muscle, and that stillness told every man at the table more than a shout would have. Simone watched him decide, in real time, to sacrifice Victor and survive. He almost had the sentence out. Mr. Shaw acted alone. When Evelyn opened the second case and laid the timestamps down, Container 4471, Evelyn said, left the port April 11th, 10:40 at night, under code 714R, 2 years after Raymond Carter was buried. There is no Carter truck. But there is. She slid a stack of receipts across the glass. A full night's shift at Bell in Time, the restaurant where Simone Carter closes alone. Every ghost container that moved under her father's code, moved on a night she was on the clock across the city. Punch cards, register receipts, timestamped to the minute. Whoever built this used her as the alibi, and every single one of those nights she can prove where she actually was. The three carriers had their own papers out now, their own ruined ledgers. 3 years of losses that suddenly had a cause with a name. And the accounts, Simone said, and looked down the length of the table. Jiwon had come in without anyone hearing, the way he did. He stood at the far end in black, sleeves folded, and he set a laptop on the table and turned it to face the board. "My books," he said. "All of them. Every transfer Kang Min-sok routed through the Carter license. Every payment to Marcus Reed to plant a dog and kill the cameras. The 3 shells that bought this woman's mother's house." He tapped the screen. "Open. Read anything you want. I'm done hiding behind her family. You disable my safeguards, you open my accounts, and for what?" Min-sok said. And his voice stayed even, which was the frightening thing about him. For a woman who fries chicken. For a dog. He looked at the board, appealing to arithmetic they all understood. He is compromised. Sentiment has made him a liability to this family. I ask that the vote proceed, and that Jiwon's testimony be struck as the act of a man protecting his what? Simone said. She stepped forward, and the 3 carriers stepped with her, and the room felt suddenly full of people who had lost something real. Say it. Protecting his what? Min-sok's narrow eyes moved over her, recalculating, finding no purchase. For the first time, a muscle ticked at his jaw. "You built a trap and baited it with a dead man," Simone said. "You bought a starving dog and a widow's house and a man's old shame, and you stacked them so that when it broke, it would break on the 2 people already grieving. You were very good. You were good for 3 years." She set her father's ring hand flat on the glass. "You just never once imagined the bait could read." Min-sok looked at his cousin the way you look at someone who has just set both your houses on fire. You're burning yourself down. "Yes," Jiwon said. "That's the only way to prove the fire was never hers. The vote never happened. Or it happened and went the other way. The board, faced with a recording, a wall of timestamps, 3 ruined carriers, and the white serpent voluntarily opening accounts no subpoena had ever pried, did the only arithmetic that kept them out of a federal filing. They removed Min-sok from the board before lunch. Victor Shaw left the building between 2 men who were not his lawyers. By the end of the week, the district attorney had both recordings, both cases, and the punch cards from a night kitchen nobody had ever thought to timestamp. The Carter transportation license was surrendered, and the debt against it annulled. The dead company was finally allowed to be dead. Simone drove her mother to Cardiovascular Surgical Associates 11 days later. The envelope that had sat sealed and face down on the side table for 3 years was open now, and paid, and it had not taken Victor's $25,000 or Jiwon's charity to pay it. Evelyn had filed against the estate that ruined the carriers, and the first settlement had cleared the surgery and the arrears both. Gloria walked in on her own feet, the valve held. In the waiting room, Simone signed a different kind of paper. She had incorporated a new company. Not Carter Transportation. That name belonged to her father and to the ground now. She had called it Carter After Midnight because that was when she had always done her real work, and because a night kitchen had turned out to be the one clock nobody could forge. Small, legitimate. Her own license, in her own hand, the R at the end of her signature, the way he'd taught her to make it, sitting at the table showing her how the tale should close. Jiwon became her first client, a real one. Transparent freight, open books, a contract Evelyn wrote with no traps because none were needed anymore. He paid on time and let her read everything and never once put a dog on a chain to make anyone loyal. Hades came off the chain the day the cameras came down for good, and nobody called him Monster anymore because there was no one left who needed him to be one. Marcus Reed talked, in the end, once the tapes he'd been afraid of stopped being worth anything to a cousin who no longer sat on any board. He handed the district attorney the camera logs, the payment dates, the nights he'd been told to look the other way, while a container that didn't exist rolled out under a dead man's code. What Min-sok had used to leash him lost its teeth the moment the leash holder lost his standing. Fear, it turned out, was another thing that only worked as long as someone had power to hide behind. Evelyn kept the vault. She told Simone she'd keep it as long as Carter After Midnight had a single truck on the road, because a company built out of somebody else's forgery ought to be the most documented company in the state. Simone didn't argue. She'd learned what it cost to be the only person who could read the paper, and she never intended to be that alone again. Gloria took her evening pill in the kitchen with the light on, the burnt stairwell bulb finally replaced, the number that had lived unspoken between her and her daughter for 3 years now, just a paid receipt in a drawer. Some nights Simone still closed a kitchen and walked out into the cold with a steel container under her arm. But she parked on the street now, $11 a night, because she could, and because she no longer needed to cross a dark yard to reach anything. The dog waited for her at the end of a street that was just a street. The man waited beside the dog. She had stopped, somewhere in the 11 days, teaching herself not to want them there. She'd learned it the way she'd learned everything, slowly, at night, from the ground up. The 3 of them walked the same way home. Nobody was starving, nobody was chained, nobody was hiding behind anybody's name. She had fed a hungry animal until it trusted her hand, and in the end that was the whole story. Not who owned the dog, or the yard, or the license, but who chose to put the leash down first. Simone Carter walked into the light, and this time she did not lower her eyes for anyone. If this story moved you, stop for a moment and reflect. Have you ever carried a debt that wasn't yours, working the night shift while the people who wronged your family slept easy? Have you ever fed kindness to something the whole world called a monster and found the truth waiting on the other side of the gate? Would you have kept your dignity and refused the money even when silence felt safer? Tell us your experiences and feelings in the comments. We read them all. And if you believe in stories about dignity, truth, and loyalty, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a part of our community and help the channel.